Prepare yourself to be blown away by the seismic sounds and scrutiny of AFTERSHOCKS Podcast with Chris Aiken and Matt Hartnett.
All right, well, here we go. Welcome to another episode of AFTERSHOCKS, and this is a little different. This is our little separate sort of podcast. Well, it's connected to AFTERSHOCKS, but we call it Tremors. It's the second one we've done, and it's a little bit more, as you know, we were just talking, obviously, the three of us. It's more of a free-form type of discussion, but of course, we're going to do some discussing here of the new great band called Sons of Silver. Once again, I'd like to welcome the guest of the podcast, vocalist Peter Argyropoulos from Los Angeles, band called Sons of Silver. Great to see you again, Peter. And yeah, congratulations. The official release is now out. The new EP titled DOOMSDAY NOISES, available everywhere for purchase and streaming now. And I know the last time we talked to you, I think you mentioned the name of the EP was going to be called Rude Awakenings. Did you guys, any reason why you guys decided to call it DOOMSDAY NOISES instead of Rude Awakenings?
Yeah, well, first, thanks for having me on again, Matt, and thank you, Chris. Thanks. It's great to be here. I love your guys' show, and it's a lot of fun. So thank you. Yeah, we were going to go with Rude Awakenings just because we thought that was it was an appropriate title for the group of songs, as well as we liked it. But we had two problems. One is that it is one of the same title of one of the songs on the EP. In fact, the first song. And second, we were having trouble with the artwork. And finally, I was just like, you know what? Let's just clean house here. Let's just come up with a new name, and that'll maybe get us in a different direction for the artwork. And we were running out of time. We were actually long past our due date. So yeah, that kind of helped us. So and the funny part is when we got it to the folks at Universal, even just the name itself, they're like, oh yeah, Doomsday Noise is so appropriate, because this was in early June, and and I said, is it too heavy? They go, no, it's not heavy enough. It's just heavy enough. I mean, so I was like, okay, great.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Who does your art, by the way? That art it reminds me so much of that TV show, The Americans, and the artwork that they had for that show. Who does that for you guys?
Well, Brina is our art director.
Oh,
and
wow.
Cool. But we work with an artist, Donnie Phillips.
Okay.
And the two of them work pretty hand in hand. And to be honest with you, I kind of stay out of it. It's not my thing. I've learned to just focus on making art that appeals to your ears as opposed to your eyes.
Sure.
And so they handle it. But we picked a direction for the time being of sticking with that sort of propaganda art, and that's their thing, and yeah, so they do it.
Yeah, awesome. Now that we've had also a chance to, like we were just mentioning before we started this, we had a chance to listen to all the songs now, man. We love the EP. It's we've had a bigger sample size now, and so we can of course talk more about the release, and more importantly, let's talk about your contributions to the record. We obviously talked a lot about the lyrical content last time we spoke, but in terms of your vocal style, we just want to talk a little bit about your vocals. I really do enjoy how diverse your vocals are. I love how, you can get real deep at times and then kind of raise it. I mean, you're really all over the place. I love it. When I first heard Read 'Em the Rights, the first thing I noticed was in the chorus. I got a sound of like Mike Ness from Social Distortion. That's what it reminded me of. Just the part in the chorus. But when you listen to the rest of the song, not at all like that. Just that one part. No. Yeah, but I also hear, I mean, I'm sure Chris is probably gonna be like, no way. I hear, like, when your voice, I hear a little bit.
Wait, Chris just texted me, no way. Oh, wait.
Okay, so there you go. Yeah, see, he got it in there before I could say anything. But I hear like a mixture, like a little bit, like tidbits of like maybe like John Cafferty and like Jeff Healey in there as well. I don't know if anyone's probably never told you that, but it's just something I took out of it. Who do you get compared to when people talk about your voice, and what have you been hearing so far?
Well, I've actually heard Mike Ness a couple times in the last week, which was interesting, which is to me great. I mean, I love his raspiness, and it's just his whole style is very rock and roll. It's just, you know, it's loose, but it's not all over the place. And he's got a deep voice too, you know. So I hear that. You know, I hear Springsteen occasionally. I'll hear, you know, I don't hear a lot. It's more like it's just this deep voice, you know, and it's got a resonance, and it's very rock and roll, but it's not one of those high pitched voices. But again, Mike Ness, this is the third time in the last week, so
oh wow, okay,
that's pretty cool.
I will not compare, other than what I will say is I think what makes your voice unique, very unique, is your phrasing. You have a very unique way of phrasing words and kind of tying lines together that is, you know, like we were saying before we started, it's the bubble gum in the hair thing. It's sticky, you know, it sticks in your head, and it makes you want to sing it too, because it's phrased. It doesn't sound bland, you know.
Is it you think that's because the melodic? I'm just curious. That's a great compliment. Do you think it's the melodic phrasing, or it's the words, maybe the way they're, because sometimes, you know, I'll play with words, but I don't not overplay with them.
I'm gonna be honest, I think it's probably a little bit of both. I think there's no question, if anybody listens to this one time, they will realize that it's not, well, let's rhyme lime with dime and make it fit. You know, there's some real thought that goes into the words that you've written. And I would imagine every song that you have has a scratch paper with holes erased in it, where you've scratched things out, scribbled things out, and put in new words, you know, because it didn't fit the ideas. It's a very idea oriented collection of songs. And I think a lot of times you kind of like, probably subconsciously, because, you know, this is what singers do, you lead yourself with your phrasing. You lead from this line to, a lot of times singers will lead themselves up and then drop back down and come back up again from line to line. You're more of you kind of lead yourself on a more fluid, and I know I'm talking sort of out my ass here, but you know, I listen to a lot of music. Yeah, I listen to a lot of music where I pick up those kind of patterns where you just sort of, you know, music has a definitive flow to it, and there's a definite difference in flow between sing-song singers and storytellers. And I would say your phrasing is very much in the storyteller zone versus the sing-song zone.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, it is. I mean, it's very, the lyrics are really important. You know, and they're not just, I would say in many ways they're the most important to me, because if I'm not singing something that I feel, I just can't sing it very well, you know. I probably couldn't even sing it at all. So that's part of it. The other part of it is that when we're building up these songs, which I think we discussed last time, we generally do it as a group. I mean, it's really very rare. We have maybe 1-2 songs here and there that was a song, let's say, that I brought in, you know, to the band. So when we do that, for whatever reason, there are always what I call, you know, cornerstone or lyrics, phrases, words, you know, whatever it is that sort of just get stamped into the song, into whatever it is we're working on at the beginning, right from those first 3, 5, 10 minutes. And then the lyrics, the ideas get built around those. And often, you know, I don't know what the story is. It's like a discovery process for me. So as I start discovering the story and it starts, you know, crystallizing in my mind, specific phrases, specific images come in my head, and you know, I'll craft lyrics according to that. And what happens is then the lyrics kind of take the lead. And so there is a clear melody, but the melody is also kind of following the lyrics, and they start, you know, taking it on, as you would say, as you said, less sing-songy type of way, you know. And I still try to keep some sing-songy into it, because you don't want something that's just completely, you know, I don't know, what do you call it, shit to sing. You know? But anyway, so yeah, they kind of just sort of moves around, you know, and also I think that, you know, I sang a lot with my dad growing up, and he wrote a lot of songs, and he did a lot of, he's a Greek immigrant, and so he was, you know, came to the country when he was about 15, and he was writing songs when he was his late teens, and he did a lot of unusual things. And I think even though he was much older when he had me, he passed on those those idiosyncrasies to me to a degree.
Yeah.
So
cool, man. Yeah, I think a great example of that is on the song Outbreak. You know how, I mean, just the build up you do, especially towards the end of that song. I mean, I love it. It just keeps you, it's just like a steady riser. That kind of like, you know, you just, it's, I mean, and really, I haven't heard too many songs that are sung like that. And when they are, I love it because, like you said, you can really feel, like you said, you're going not so much with the lyrics, you're going with the feel of the song. It's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
And it's just, and it's taking, like you said, the lyrics are taking you where you want to go there, which I love. And also in that song too, I mean, you're quite the clairvoyant there with the, you know, there's an outbreak from a foreign land. Like I said, obviously these lyrics were written, you know, I hope people understand that they were written way before this was even, you know, this whole pandemic occurred. And also with that, I mean, you get any reaction from that from anybody in terms of like, you know, they're going to assume obviously that this is a song about this pandemic. I mean, just from hearing the lyrics, but obviously it's not because like you said,
yeah, no, surprisingly, no one has said that. And as we were talking about earlier, we almost didn't put the song out. It was this close to not coming out. I was like, this is just, people aren't going to, they're not going to know, or they're not even going to believe us when I say to them, no, these lyrics were written, you know, in October of 2019. And they're like, no way. I mean, my own father was like that. No way. Come on. I mean, like, come on, Peter, come on. And then he goes, what do you think, you're a prophet or something? Like, oh God, Dad. There, you had to go there. So no, it's just one of those things that it happened. It is what it is. And so yeah. And when we were doing it, it was you know, we were just running with emotion. I was running with it. All of us were. And you know, even within the verses of the song, you listen to each verse, they're all different. They, you know, there are 3 verses.
Yeah,
each one is different. Each one's successively building. And that's because I was just experimenting with different vocal phrases, different melodies. And as we were all listening back, we were like, well, we kind of like all of them, just stick with that. And in fact, in the third one, where Kevin's got that Kevin, our lead guitarist, has that bending guitar going on. I was actually following him. I was trying to find something. He starts playing that, and we have it on our original, you know, demos. I start copying his line right away, and we're like, hey, that's great. Okay, next, you know. And so it's, I don't know where we're at, but yeah, it's one of those things where it's just it's a very instinctual. There's not a lot of head going on. There's a lot of heart and following things, and then, you know, put all that meat on there, lay it all out, and then go back with, you know, with a comb and clean it up a bit. Not too much, but just enough where it's, you know, palatable, accessible, so on and so forth. But I'm really glad that you guys are digging that too, and I'm really glad that people are digging it because we love that song.
It's a great song, man. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Well, Peter, one thing I wanted to talk about before we get into wherever we go was and we talked a little bit about it before we started, but I want you to actually talk about it, you know, officially. I wanted you to talk a little bit about radio and specifically how difficult it is these days to compete at radio, because, you know, I did radio personally. I was on commercial radio for 12 years. So I sat in a lot of program director meetings and got thrown a lot of CDs and was like, pass. Oh, this looks good. You know, and a lot of times that was the measuring stick. This looks good. It wasn't even a listen to. It was, this looks good. Throw it on the cool pile. And then we would take a listen. You know, you're obviously, I'm assuming the goal which you're achieving is getting radio play. How difficult or not difficult has it been so far to get Sons of Silver on the radio?
So far, it's been pretty smooth, I must admit. We didn't fully know what to expect going into it. You know, we met with a few different radio teams, talked to the Universal folks, you know, had a bunch of powwows for weeks, right?
Sure.
And finally chose a path and a direction. And that focused around obviously this EP, the lead single being Read 'Em Their Rights. There was, you know, it was a neck and neck what the first single would be between Read 'Em Their Rights and Rude Awakenings, which is the first track on the EP. But in the end, Read 'Em won out. And you know, and I from my perspective, I had to put all the you got to let go of the reins to the radio people. But everyone was like, look, I think we got something strong here. And then as they heard the EP, we're like, we definitely have something strong. And they've, the idea is to go out to some of the smaller and mid-sized markets first, build from the ground up. It's a little easier to get in their eyes, you know, and let's say, well, I don't want to name towns here, but, a town with, I say town, a place with 250,000 population, 500,000 population, as opposed to, a big market like Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, and the likes. So we've done that. In the meantime, we have hit a couple of those markets already. But going back to your basic question and how hard it is, it's really hard because there are tons of artists who are, trying to all, get onto this, squeezed into just a few hours of time that they're actually playing music. And it's fortunate because for us that we have good people who really believe in us, who have been able to translate that to stations who are now actually taking us on to the point where we hit the top 40. We hit number 40 this week on the active rock charts for radio, which is for us, that was our goal after 3-4 months, and we've gotten there within the first 3 weeks or so. So, let's hope it carries. Now everyone's saying, hey, top 30, top 20, I don't know. I mean, it seems hard, but it seems hard.
Sure. Have you heard it in your car yet?
No, but I don't really listen to the radio in my car. I probably shouldn't be saying that.
You've heard it in your car on your phone, right?
Yeah, exactly. Oh no, I've heard it. Oh no, yeah, on my phone. Yeah, every now and then, yeah, we'll click on. I'll be like, ah.
Well, me and Chris were talking about earlier. I mean, the band's sound it's just to us, it's rock, and it's something. It's been a long time since just rock has been sort of, something that's on commercial radio. I mean, you've got all different types of. You've got indie rock. You've got, all types of. I can go through them all, but. Really just rock in general. Because your guys' sound, it's just no little subgenre to it. It's just to us, well, at least to our ears, it's pure rock and roll. And I think there's a lot of challenges these days for a band like you guys in terms of touring. I mean, what kind of bands do you see you guys touring with? Like, for instance, do you see yourselves kind of like going out with the bands like the Pearl Jams or Candleboxes? But at the same time, you don't really want to tour with those bands because you also want to separate yourself and make your own name, So it's like, that's, I think, probably one of the most, important, parts of a new rock band that's coming out these days is really, who do you tour with? Is that band like sounds like you guys? It's like, there's really nobody that sounds like you out there. It really isn't.
Hold on. I don't think they're going to distance themselves from a stadium tour with Pearl Jam.
No, I know, but of course.
Well, we're going to really have to assess that one. It's between that and the club with 150 people. I don't know.
Well, I mean, do you think that's something like, for instance, the other band members who are from, Skillet, from Candlebox and Pearl Jam? Do you who've been in those bands, and still are with Candlebox? Do you think that's something that to them they're like, well, I'm just trying to kind of get into the mind of in their headspace of, you want to obviously separate yourself, but at the same time, like Chris said, you're not going to say to no to those opportunities,
Yeah, I mean, look, that's a tough one to answer in the sense that we don't have a clear idea as far as who we would necessarily be opening for, because obviously if Pearl Jam calls you up, U2 calls you up, you could run the list a mile long of some of those big acts that we would do fine opening for. If we turned it down, I think, you guys would probably fly in with baseball bats and beat me, right? So nonetheless, so forget that. So it's where is it after that? And I think, first of all, we're the people who have gotten to know us really well as far as in the industry, or who are just getting to know us in the booking end of things, and even at radio, they've heard some of our other tracks which aren't out yet, and they're like, yeah, you guys are more like a Radiohead band, more Radiohead in the mid-late 90s. You have a little more variety to you. Yes, you're a rock and roll band. Everyone says hands down what you guys said was you're a rock and roll band. And when people ask me, I say we're a rock and roll band. I said, if you like rock and roll, but it's a unique presentation, updated, but still something that you can sort of, you see its lineage, You can hear its lineage. I said, then you should check this out. So anyway, so there aren't a lot of those acts out there right now who are not mega. They're either mega acts that are left, maybe just below that, and that's about it. So we don't know. We may have to just sort of test the waters and see what happens, you know. And I wouldn't say that we'll adjust our sound or our set, but everyone may have to be a little open-minded that, you know, we may open for someone they're a little lighter and we'll be a little heavier, or vice versa. And we've done that before, where we've been the you know, the lighter or the heavier band, and it's always worked out well, because the songs are pretty, you know, they're pretty relatable in a sense, you know. And it's not like we're up there, you know, headbanging or setting on fire.
Would there be a preference though? Would you rather be the lighter band or the heavier band?
You know, actually, I'd rather just sort of melt in.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't want to be the heavier band. I probably would rather be the lighter band if it was going to err to one side, because the heavier band, you know, the couple times that's happened, you can see the people in the audience are just
those eyes.
You know, and it's not like we're a heavy band, because that's going to mean that the next act is pretty light. So that's actually very unlikely. It's more likely that we'll be the lighter band.
Okay.
You know?
Now, Peter, one of the things Matt and I were talking about this afternoon is we were kicking around some ideas of what to talk about today, and we loved when you were on last time and how much we got off into rock and roll history and Springsteen and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
And kind of what all three of us started talking about before we started was about different subgenres of music. And the one thought that came up was that it seems like while there's a million subgenres of music out there, if you really look throughout rock and roll history, throughout the, you know, from Elvis to now, the bands that became the mega bands, just about like 99% of them were bands that were rock and roll bands only. They were not subgenre. They were not emo core, or you know, they're all 4/4 time. They're all, you know, verse chorus verse bands, you know, that straight ahead, no, I don't want to say no frills, but not built on frills rock music. And the question we had was, with that being the style that is clearly throughout history been what grabs people and keeps people, why is there such a reluctance to do it now? And I mean, you're obviously doing it yourself, but I'm curious, you know, because you've done other styles of music as well, where, you know, we were just trying to put a finger on what is it that makes people, you know, try and do a subgenre when the old time rock and roll, as Bob Seger once said, works, you know?
Well, I mean, you guys tell me, but I mean, I think people are always looking to find their own niche, you know, more than ever. So that will allow, you know, I shouldn't say will allow, but that will lead people to splinter off and, you know, do their own thing. And then, you know, everything has a name these days, a tag to it. So, you know, it may start out as rock and roll, then it becomes rock, then it becomes croc, then it becomes crocodiles, then it becomes, you know, I don't know, I'm just making stuff up. You know what I'm saying?
Sure, yeah.
Crocodile music, you know, in 4/4, dub step beat, junk, what, I don't know. It's like all that stuff. So to me, yeah, it does get like that. It gets a little weird, but at the end of the day, when you say rock or rock and roll to me, what the way that resonates with me, the way that translates to me is just doing something straightforward, you know, and that doesn't mean it lacks craftsmanship. It doesn't, you know, lack some subtlety and just it'll branch out as well. But at the end of the day, it's honest, you know. And I think that is something that, you know, is kind of, it's a little harder to find these days, not because it doesn't exist, but because it's surrounded by a lot of noise of I hate to say it, a lot of people making a lot of mediocre stuff.
Sure, yeah.
They'll take the tools that are more easily accessible than ever before. They'll drop a couple loops in there, drop a couple samples, put some stuff on top of it. That's just okay. Yeah, I mean, it's not bad, but it's not good. And then you get 20, 30, 50 million people doing that. It's hard for then the artists who are maybe being a little more honest and pushing themselves harder to do something a little more unique, fresh, something that maybe hasn't been heard quite as much.
Sure.
So that makes it harder to find. So I think there are people doing it, but there are more people doing stuff that's just like, yeah, I'm just doing this, but you kind of have to ask yourself why.
Yeah. Do you think that, and I know this is going way old school to make a point about today, but do you think that MTV, and I don't want to say something that happened 40 years ago is having some grand effect today, but I do kind of think that MTV really changed how people wrote music, because they wrote for the video instead of
for the visual.
Right? I mean, if you go to anything before the Buggles, you're getting the Eagles, and there's a very distinct difference between the Eagles and the Buggles. There's a very distinct difference between My Sharona and Fleetwood Mac. And I know these are drastic examples that I'm using, but I think that the point is that MTV almost created like an addiction generation, and that bled into creativity to where artists went to create something quick that would get them on TV, and then they would be maybe they would have a 5-year run or a 10-year run, and artists tended to forget that the Eagles are still selling out concerts 40 years later, and the Who and Paul McCartney, all these guys still play stadiums. And even the bands that came up in the MTV generation that were just kind of straightforward, Black Crowes, still around, and anytime they decide they want to tour, they can still put 15,000 people in seats.
Yeah,
it's my hunch anyway, and I'm curious what you think as a musician. If you think that while MTV may have been great for the boom of the business, it may not have been great for the creativity of the music.
Yeah, well, that's a tough one, because there are some of those bands that I like, like
sure.
Pet Shop Boys, but no, I do actually, but no, I think that's a tough one. Yeah, I think it taints it for sure, because everything becomes much more visually oriented.
Sure.
So forget even the way the songs are written. The whole presentation almost in a visual form supersedes the music, or at least it sort of catches right up. Like, for instance, I remember one time a few years ago, I was out to dinner with a couple friends, and along with us was the former president of the record label that had what was the band, Steely Dan.
Okay.
And I think I can say this, I can retell this story, and no one will get upset. But needless to say, he had never really seen them. He just signed off on the back being signed, and heard the album, thought their first album, thought it was great, and went to see them at one of their first concerts, and looked at them, and he said, okay, here's what happens. You never, ever, ever let them come out in public again, because they weren't the most appealing looking act, right? Now, mind you, I'm not a huge Steely Dan fan. I'm not a hater. It's just not my thing. But the music, has resonated with a lot of people. It's great. It's great music. So, but visually, if they had come out a few years later in the MTV era, let's say even by the mid 80s, that they may have had a really tough time getting through, because the labels, as I understand, were their main way in which they would break artists was through MTV or eventually VH1 and the likes. These guys looked a little goofy.
Yeah.
Goofy may not have been the right look. So hold on one second here. Lower power mode on my phone. May have been like, sorry guys, and would not that have been a tragedy? No Steely Dan, because they didn't look so appealing.
Yeah, another band falls in the exact same category, Boston. As massive as those records were, I'll be honest, I had never even seen Boston, like the guys that were in Boston, until probably 2004 or something when I actually went to see a Boston concert, you know, and I had never seen these guys. And I had, like everybody else, I had those albums for forever, for my whole life. It really, but when you see videos of them now and you see the big afro and, you know, the big drummer with that big afro and whatnot, and Brad Delp with the big afro and whatnot, it's like, yeah, these guys would not have been MTV successes. They just wouldn't have been.
No. Well, another great example is the band Toto. I mean, you got a band right there. Yeah. Right? All a bunch of session musicians. They weren't given a prayer. I mean, everyone just kind of laughed at them and were like, you got to be kidding me, because they probably looked less rock and roll than any band out there at the time. Yet and they kicked ass. I mean, they played so many different styles. But, you know, and going back to the MTV thing, I also think a lot of it has to do, if you really want to think about it, MTV has a big responsibility for creating, as we were talking about before, all those subgenres due to those scenes with the fashion statements. You know, that was the thing about MTV, was all about, I mean, you could start, like you said, the early 80s when it was mostly metal. Then we got hair metal. Then you got the grunge. Then you got more into, you know, hip hop got in there. Then you had a lot of that new metal stuff towards the end of the 90s. But then once MTV stopped playing music and it became basically, it wasn't playing music videos anymore. I mean, in a lot of ways, rock also kind of, you know, died along with that. I mean, in a way, you could look at MTV was keeping rock alive for a long time. You know, even though I think it did definitely contributed to, you know, its demise in a way. It also kept it alive a long time, and it really hasn't been the same since MTV stopped playing videos and music.
That's a really good point. I mean, and it also kept them alive, you know, because there were selling, you know, old catalog with CDs. There were, you know, and that whole cycle was sort of keeping, you know, that a certain style of music around that probably had, you know, sort of passed its time. Maybe not past its prime, but it needed a cleanse, let's say. You know, I don't know if all that makes sense what I said, but yeah, I mean, I you know, I hadn't really thought about it the way you said that. That's a good point. I mean, to me, the biggest thing was that it made the visual so much more important than it had been in the past. Look, yeah, it was important in the days of Elvis. Obviously, it was important in days of even, you know, before that, Frank Sinatra and Bing Crosby, for sure. Obviously, you know, clearly the Beatles, the way everything evolved from there was, you know, we can see from the hairstyles and the growth there that everyone was always pushing the limits visually, but still though, the music was the leader. And then it got to that point where music's not necessarily the leader anymore. It may be like it's got a partner, and then it takes the backseat. I mean, let's face it, Madonna in many ways was much more visual than musical, and I like a lot of Madonna's tracks, so it's not a slight on her music. So then things at that point, it starts unraveling. It's like, you know, is the chicken or egg thing? Who's leading who here? Is the tail wagging the dog? And once that falls apart, and then people, maybe the audience sort of loses, I don't know, they lose interest, they lose respect, they sort of just go off and find other things, you know. But it's definitely MTV changed the course of musical history in ways that are debatable.
And it absolutely made some of the bands. I'll tell a quick story. One of my really good friends is Billy Morris, who was the guitar player in Warrant. And through Billy, I got to know Janie before he passed away. And one of the stories Janie told me, and I think he's told it on TV as well, so it's not like it's a new story or anything, was that they finished the album that became Cherry Pie, was supposed to be called Uncle Tom's Cabin, and they turned it in and got it sent back to him saying, well, we don't see, not hear, see and get. And so Janie wrote Cherry Pie in 45 minutes, and they heard the demo, envisioned the video to go with the demo. And let's face it, that is why Warrant had their career, was because of that song. You know, that song really took them from struggling, you know, middle of the road hair metal band to, you know, right there with Poison and Motley Crue and the bands of the time. So, you know, it's a weird thing that people were somewhat writing music to MTV. And I agree with both points, that it, you know, it may have hurt, and at the same time, it may have kept the business alive. Personally, I'm glad it's gone because, you know, as a music fan, I like music that's not influenced by anything but the 4 or 5 guys that are in the room writing the songs. You know, that just,
I'm with you. I'm with you. I mean, at the same time, we say that, but it's kind of happening again because now, you know, with the way Spotify and the likes works, you get paid per song that's streamed. So people are putting out, you know, an albums with like 40, 30 second, 60 second, 90 second songs to try to get more plays, because then they make more money because the way it's all calculated. So I guess whatever the principle or the leading delivery method is, that the artists start trying to, you know, cater to that or you know, maneuver so that they can, you know, up their chances with reaching more people and becoming famous, so to speak. So for me, it's just a game I can't play. I don't know how to do it, and I can speak for the rest of the guys and the gal in the band that we're not like that. Doesn't mean we don't pay attention to things. You know, we're not going to sit there and try to shove 10-minute songs down the throats of people who are looking for 3- and 4-minute songs. But at the same time, you know, we're not going to sit there and be like, well, you know, I don't know, is that lyric really the appropriate thing to say? Is that the right beat? Maybe we should bump that one up from 142 beats per minute to 146.
Totally.
You know, and not because we feel it, but because that then suddenly we're within a different subgenre that will start playing us more. And then that XYZ station or that outlet will play us more.
I know.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
And I very much doubt that your drummer is going to say, yeah, the videos for Jeremy and Alive, that didn't help us at all. You know, I doubt.
Fair enough. Yeah, exactly. Well, you know, the interesting thing on that note is Dave is, you know, we all love the band, but Dave's in many ways he's like a lot of the center of the band. He keeps the center, be like, you know, it's if there's ever any talk, which is very little that we'll have about the industry, so to speak, and maneuvering around it, he'd be like, guys, let's make great music. That'll take, everything will take care of itself after that. It may take a little longer if you're not the flavor of the month, but if you make great stuff and you're consistent about how you present it, you make great relationships with people so you can all take that journey together, it generally that cream will rise. And he's very right about that.
Yeah, I agree. And you know, I remember. Yeah. I remember the last time we talked to you, you made a good point. You said, you know, one of the reasons too that rock's kind of dying out, it needs some more fuck you to it. You know what I mean? The fuck you attitude is like, it's no longer, you know, controversial and dangerous like it used to be. It's more conforming. It's safe. You know, and it's, you know, I mean, you know, it's just, I guess a lot of it has to do with the fear of media criticism these days, obviously, too. You know, it's not about sticking it to the man. It's now about sticking up for the man. You know what I mean? It's really lost its attitude. That rebellious attitude is gone, you know, and obviously for younger, the younger kids, younger fans of music, they're going to look for that danger. They're not going to rock anymore for it. You know what I mean?
I don't know that they're going anywhere.
Yeah. Well,
they're going to Twitter, complain about it.
Complain about it. Exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. Where are they going? It's true. Yeah.
You know, I mean, in the sense of like they're not. It's almost like reversed now in the sense of like the whole idea is to not, you know, to not push buttons, to not make people feel uncomfortable, to allow them to have their safe places. So I'm sitting there and I'm going, okay, I understand you don't want to go around hurting people, you know, with your fists, with your words, whatever it is. At the same time, though, you know, sometimes you got to dig a little bit to make people think differently, to get them to maybe move out of the way, to embrace a different way of thinking. And plus, it's a little fun. It's like, you know, it's like if you don't have comedy with some digs, in a sense, what is it, comedy anymore? What is it? I mean, it's just a speech. So rock and roll, it's good to have a little rebellion. It's good to ruffle things up. I'm not saying you go out in the streets and you start breaking windows and stealing Nikes necessarily. Don't get me wrong on that one. But it is good to go out there and be like, hey, you know what? Here's a different way to look at it. Blah 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 blah. And I don't really see much of that in any genre, especially from the lyrical end. I see very little of it personally. because I think there a lot of people are afraid. Things in the industry in general have industries across the board, but speaking specifically about the music industry, it's become very corporate. So there's a lot of even with small labels, there's a lot of analysis. You know, well, is that track is it going to be offensive to someone? Is it going to be able to get on, you know, XYZ playlists? Is it going to, you know, potentially be have any sync value? You know, sync as in being on a commercial, a TV commercial, or in film, or the likes. So there are all these reservations where it should just be like, hey, I had this idea, I'm gonna write this fucking song, and we did it, and it resonates with people. So let's not overthink it. Let's just go out there and play it, and however we can. And that's what it should be about. You know, the last thing I'll say, I know I'm going on long here, is I don't understand this whole shutting people up and canceling them. I'm sorry, I don't mean to get political, but I don't get it. I want to hear differing ideas. I want to sit in a room with people who have opinions and who will say to me, hey, you know, here's a different way to look at it. You may be thinking about it this way, but here's a different way. And I don't want to be like, no, shut up. I want to be like, huh, okay. And it may get heated. That's fine. As long as things remain reasonably respectful of each other, that's a good thing, because you know what, that'll lead me to rethink my ideas, and I hope what I present to them will lead them to rethink their ideas, and maybe within the both of us, or all of us rethinking, we can find a common ground, and then we can move on to the next phase. But right now that's not happening, and I see a lot of people sort of like just caving in, selling out, talking about bling, talking about private parts, you know, I'll be a little nice here, and stuff like that. And I'm like, that's the best you can do? Really? Really? I mean,
do you think at all, and this might be an oversimplification, it probably is, but do you think a reason that we do have, you know, sort of a violence problem in the streets, and I'm not only talking about the rioting of the last month, I'm just talking in general, that we have a lot of physical outcry, is because we don't have that angst anymore where we can let loose our aggression. You know, it's just not there. It's not there on, we all used it in music and in different, whether it was fist in the air or fuck the man or a mosh pit or whatever it was, we had outlet.
Limp Bizkit, I'm going to break shit.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. Well, but it was one thing to sing it and be like, yeah, you know, and it's another thing to not have that outlet. Well, that aggression when you're mad has to go somewhere. Yeah. And a lot of us put it into music, and now it's not there.
Yeah. There's a lot to be said for that. That's very reasonable to think that. I've thought at times, you know, I don't know. I don't have an answer for you. I know that growing up for me, I mean, I wasn't actually a big concert goer. I like to go to clubs and stuff that was a little more chill. But I know a ton of my friends, most of them, I should say, you know, liked going to these big festivals, you know, heavy rock concerts, even stuff that was lighter. And they just liked that energy, and it was very electric. It was also very cathartic. So does it happen now? Yeah, it happens, but I don't know that it happens in the same rebellious way. But maybe it does, and we're just not aware of it, you know. But I think, you know, I think in general, though, I think people are uneasy and they're afraid for the most part. Some people have no qualms about saying anything. They'll say the most obnoxious things on earth all the time, and you're stuck to live with that.
Are you picking on me now? What?
No, I mean, then there are folks who will, you know, a lot of people are just afraid, you know, and they want to engage with people, but they don't know how to do it. What's the right way? What's the polite way? How can I do it and not offend someone, and just maybe do it in such a way that I don't give them a sense that I'm trying to offend them. So even if I do, they'll recognize that it was an error. But with all that in mind, I think people want a release, but they don't know where those avenues are. I don't know. I'm just guessing here. You know, we're just talking out loud, thinking out loud, right?
Of course, yeah. No, and I think a lot of it has to do also too with the technology. I mean, people communicate now via text on their phones. They're not calling each other up. So what that's led to as well is the dissolution of the band. Now it's you know, it's easy. Obviously, this is why you don't see bands anymore. You see individuals. You know, when you see pop music or anything that's on the radio, it's very rare that you're seeing bands. I mean, because obviously that, like you mentioned, Peter, I mean, music has become so corporate. So it's a lot easier for these lawyers and these music executives to control the solo artist, to take a bigger, piece of that profit. When you've got a band and you've got all these team members a part of it, it's tough. So people are becoming more, it's more, they don't know how to stay in bands. I mean, we see it all the time when bands are around, they're not lasting very long. I mean, that's always been a challenge, obviously, for, musicians in general, but I think now more so than ever, also kids with playing instruments. They don't pick up and play an instrument anymore. I noticed that years ago when Guitar Hero became like the thing, and you saw these Guitar Hero competitions in Vegas that they were having, and I'm just like, wow, why people are spending so much time learning a fake guitar on a video game? They're not. Why take that time and go learn the real thing? It's like they just don't have the patience anymore. Everything's very instant gratification. The attention spans is just so short more than ever. I mean, like I said, this is why people are releasing. A lot like you guys are doing, right? You're releasing EP now. It's probably better to release EPs instead of releasing these full lengths because the attention span is so short. They listen to it, for a minute. Okay, that's great. What's next? It's not like it was when we were growing up. I mean, we get that album we waited for a couple of years from a band we love, and we didn't stop playing that thing until eventually we wore out. The tapes start getting chewed up on the cassettes or whatever it was. Or the CD got scratched. So it's just such a. The way that people could, the kids consume music. I mean, we do it too. Obviously, I consume music, a lot more via, for instance, streaming now. Just because my car doesn't have a damn CD player, I would much rather buy the CD and put it in.
What's a CD player?
Yeah, what is that exactly? It's great to see vinyl now going back. I mean, I will say that I do collect vinyl. I love seeing that becoming a factor again. But at the same time, vinyl's not very, it's not compatible. It's not very convenient. You can't take that in your car. You can't take that when you're walking around. So it's just, I think a lot of it has to do with, it's just the factors in terms of convenience, what's the easiest way to consume and what's the cheapest way. And unfortunately that's created, so what kids want to get now, what kids want to be involved and be in a band? We grew up, right? That's all we wanted to do. We saw those bands when we were kids and those records that our parents were playing us. And obviously, I grew up in the MTV era. So it was like, wow, that's what I want to do. I mean, these kids now, it's just like, they're not, it's just things just aren't exciting. And like you guys have been saying, I think a lot of it's because they've been sort of shut down because of this, PC cancer culture thing that's going on,
That's a part of it. The other part too, and I'll, as a 51-year-old guy, I'll blame my generation for it. We did a bad job raising our kids as far as appreciating music. We were taught, I was taught the same as what you were saying, Matt, about get an album. And man, if I got an album, my favorite band as a kid was Journey. If Journey put out a record, by the end of the first week, I knew every word of the album. I knew every word of the liner notes. I knew who played, played a triangle on some song at the end. I knew every ounce of it. The kids today are, it's so disposable. There's no value put to it. They don't have to go and earn it. They just,
there you go.
Oh, somebody says that they like 6x9, which is that rap guy with the funny colors on his teeth and whatever. And it's like, okay, he has 10 billion plays on YouTube. Well, that equals zero value to anybody that listened to it because they didn't spend any money to hear it. They didn't have to save up. They don't appreciate it. They don't value it. And it's a lost art.
It is.
I mean, look, both of you guys touched on a lot of things. I would say though, that the disposability, overall it's probably a negative. I think it makes it cheap. It's almost like water out of a faucet at that point versus like the meme that I don't know if you've seen it, the meme of the African child who says, wait a minute, you guys have so much clean water that you shit in it. So I'm not making light of that at all, but
sure,
when something becomes whatever it might be a service, a physical product, or a piece of art, when it becomes that easily accessible and that inexpensive, that you really don't care about it that much. Well, you don't care about it that much, and you take it lightly, you waste it. So I think that's definitely a part of the problem. Secondly, you can't support the artist as directly as you once could, or as you once did with the purchase of music. Yes, you can help them out with Patreon and the likes of that. But let's be real about it. The number one way that people always would support an artist in music, that is, would be to buy their albums or their, buy their music in recorded form, or to go to a show. Shows, fortunately, well, unfortunately for the last few months and for probably the rest of the year, are a no-go. It's not happening. But they have been doing really well for most artists, especially in the rock area. But purchasing music, you can't. You basically go to Spotify, you pay your $10. That money gets spread around to a bunch of other people. It would be different if you were paying, your $10 a month to Spotify, if you were doing one of their subscription services, that is, and your money was going to, let's say you spent $10, $8, or $5 had to go for overhead to maintain Spotify, but you had $5 left over, and that went to the artists that you actually listened to that month. So if you played 3 different artists and you had equal amounts of streams between them, that money would be split up between those artists. This is all theoretical, but if it did, you probably, one would feel a greater connection, like I'm actually helping, I'm supporting this artist. That doesn't happen now. And then the other thing is, as far as in the making of the music, it used to be, if you want to be in a band, let's say, or if you want to make music, you kind of had to get a few people together to do it. In the 80s and the likes, you had drum machines, but still you had to put a few cast of characters together, and you had to make some compromises, because invariably there'd be a person or two in the band who'd be like, how did I end up with this person? But you learn how to coexist, and that's sort of, the weird comings together of a variety of people created for some interesting stuff. It led each person on a different path. It also led to a lot of destruction, because a couple albums in, you wanted to kill each other. You couldn't be on a tour bus anymore. But now you just pull up your iPad, drop a loop in, get a basic melody, line going for a bar or two, and then you throw some lines over it. That's fine. It's cool. It's really cool. I do it all the time for writing. It's great. But there's something about, there's a magic that happens when people get into a room who have some degree of mastery over their instruments. And I don't mean that they're virtuosos. They know a couple chords, and they know those chords well. It could be like the Ramones or something like that. I mean, I'm a huge punk fan. Just to have a couple things that they got, and they go for it, and they follow that moment together. They follow each other, different points in that moment. Someone takes the lead, and they all go along with that. There's nothing like that. And there's nothing like that joy that comes with sharing that together. I mean, it's like, would you rather be, a professional athlete but like a golf player who wins a championship by himself? Yeah, that's great. I guess you make more money than maybe the baseball player or the basketball player likes, who has a team. But let me tell you something, looking down the road, and even at that moment when you're celebrating, and you're celebrating with that group of people who you did it together with, that's really rewarding. And that's an accomplishment, because to keep that train rolling, to keep 4, 5, 6 people and then the rest of the team moving forward, that's hard.
It's hard. Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is, and I'll piggyback off that as a fan, and for years and years and years, only until recently this stopped. I don't know if it's just that I got older, I just got less attached to the music. I mean, I'm a concert whore. I've been to literally 3,000 shows, I've been to a bunch of shows.
That's a sick man.
Yeah, I'm sick. I know it. But if it was a band that I was into, when they would first come out on stage, I would literally get chills. I would absolutely, and it could be a band that I'd seen 10 times, but if I'd seen them and then they're on stage, and I had that connection as a fan that it sounds like you have as the creator, to where I was so invested in the music, and I was so invested in the songs, and I would, I'd be riding to the show arguing with my friends about, what do you think they're going to open with? And what do you think the opera is going to be? And, and then when they would come out and, and it's Ronnie James Dio or whatever, and he opens with Neon Nights or something, it was like, oh, it was a physical connection. It was like we had this fandom, we had this connection with these songs, and now all of a sudden that connection that we had from a distance was all of a sudden close. And it sounds like that's very much the same feeling that you have when you get in a room and you're creating something that is great or feels great to you.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's very true. I hadn't thought about it like that, but that's very true. Because when you're at a concert, it's not just about what's going on stage. It's just as much about what's going on in the audience, as well as the interaction and that particular show, that particular venue, that day, whatever it might be. There's something that is unique to that. And that's what goes on when you're creating music. So when, when there's not as much of that, or I don't even know if there's not as much, but when you can okay, better yet, when it's easy to find your artist, to go on YouTube, click and watch a video and get it like that, and that satisfies you, that's selling yourself short a little bit. Yes, it's easier for the artist to reach more people, but at the same time, it's also, it can be just like a cheap way to get that artist, and it's nice to be able to go out there and share a personal human experience, not just of seeing that artist, but also celebrating that music or that whatever that art is with a bunch of other people. And that, I don't know if it's the same. Maybe it's bigger in some ways now because there are more people, but also maybe it's a little more removed too. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, good point. I think one of the things I'm thinking too is a lot of it too may have to do with the mystique, in terms of, you have now with social media, you have these avenues where you can actually interact with, these bands and these musicians you like. When we were kids, they were untouchable. All those bands were basically untouchable. And I think nowadays, even though I love it, I love being able to interact with, and hearing directly more from, a lot of fans and stuff. From musicians, and also that, I think that mystique and that, stuff that back then you would save up all your money to go see the show. Hopefully maybe you can get backstage, or it's this big thing where now I think, it's a lot more, I guess, inclusive, which I think is a good thing in a lot of ways as well. But at the same time, it's also kind of that mystique is kind of gone as well. It's not as strong as it used to be.
That definitely seems to be going on, but there's a plus and minus to it. It's great to be able to reach out and say, if you're a fan of, Tom York, Radiohead, and go, hey, Tom, how you doing? I literally love your album. And Tom really replies back to you, or at least in theory he does. But at the same time, it's kind of nice to be like those old movies from the 50s and the likes, where the pretty girls start to show you some clothes, but they don't show it all, that mystery and a little more excitement, because sometimes when they take it all off, you're like, eh.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. No, totally. I just, like I said, it's just, we can, I guess we could talk about this for days. Do you think, just quick, do you think, in your opinion, when do you think rock really stopped being as influential in people's lives? We and Chris were talking about it earlier. He was saying something to the fact that he thought, really in those hair metal days is when people were starting to tune out, because obviously in the 70s, with the 70s pop rock, a lot of those, all those artists, you could go down to, Elton John, Billy Joel, you could just go through the whole list. It was really a part of everyone's lives. Rock and roll was the thing, obviously it continued for the next couple of decades, but it really sort of tailed off, I think, in terms of, being influential in terms of, like lyrically, you would listen to those lyrics from a lot of those classic bands, and like you said, you'd really get into them. It meant a lot. I think really when the 80s did kind of hit, I think Chris made a good point. It was just all about sex, drugs, and rock. It was all pretty mundane. It was just all about 80s, getting the girl, doing some drinking, doing some coke. It was all pretty homogenous. It wasn't that it didn't separate from each other in the 80s. 90s, you could say, maybe argument the same thing with grunge. Yet I feel like really, to me, rock really sort of died out really in those mid 90s with, like I say, a Pearl Jam. I really think that was one of the real last bands, pop rock bands that really, I think, had the effect that rock did, going back to the 60s and 70s. And really just has. So when do you think, and even in the 90s, you had Green Day. There's a couple of those kind of punky bands that were, pretty, effective in terms of keeping people, into rock and stuff. But when do you really feel that rock just sort of kind of really settled away by the wayside and really started to lose its influence in people's lives?
Well, I think you're probably right. You know, somewhere in the mid '90s, you know, that started to happen. But I think it had to do not so much with the music as it did with the changing of the times. Part of it, the technology. You know, rock had a monopoly for a few decades there, as being really the sound of a generation or two, and there weren't many outlets during that time. You know, it was radio, but there were, you know, maybe a couple of radio stations per market, and in TV there were only a few stations, right?
Sure, yeah.
And then there weren't, for instance, video games like there came to be in the '90s, especially the last couple decades, right? So the competition for rock and roll, it wasn't there, and once, as time wore on, though, you know, rock became a bit of a caricature of itself. You know, let's face it, a lot of those hair bands were like just almost mocking rock and roll in a sense. It was like, how far can we take this? Can we put our shit in a box and sell it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So that turns people off in one way or another. And then that simultaneously, you know, it gets degraded when it becomes so visually oriented. It gets degraded when it becomes so corporate, where it's like we were talking about earlier. It's like, well, how's that song going to look? You know, I don't see this song as a single. So that undermines it. People start looking at, you know, to other places for musical inspiration. They also just start looking at other places, other avenues to use their free time. They may play a video game. They may, you know, go online and go on some chat, whatever it might be. So I don't think necessarily rock came down as much as it is other things came and caught up. You know, on the touring market, on the touring market, you know, rock is huge. It's still like, you know, leads the way. But you know, now on streaming services and the likes, it does not, for sure. But that's a game that ebbs and flows. So I think it's more that just a lot of other, you know, bigger genres have sort of, or become big. A lot of the genres have grown up and sort of caught up. So that's the way I see it, at least, you know. And I think it's still very relevant, and all these genres are relevant. I look at rap and hip hop now, though, versus the '90s, and I'm like, where are your guys' balls now? Sorry, don't offend anyone.
No, totally,
But and it's not to say that they won't use foul language or talk about, you know, things that are risque, but big deal. Anyone can do that.
Sure.
You know, I mean, where you actually like a Public Enemy, you know, album or track. I mean, they were grinding it as far as politically and really making you think. I mean, I can't say that I would necessarily even agree with all the things they were saying, but they made me think, and I'll listen to that stuff any day of the week. I love it because it's got a lot of heart. And now, again, going back to earlier, it's like, you know, it's like everyone's more concerned about being famous instead of just doing great stuff, and then somewhere along the way, they find themselves to be famous, you know.
And that is a great point. I think, you know, I think the other thing too is rock really, it's the one genre that really meshed and merged with all other types of genres. It welcomed in everything, welcomed in rap and hip hop, it welcomed in, I mean, all types of, you know, as industrial music or, you know, anything. It really, where I think, you know, and I think in a lot of ways by doing that, it also probably opened up a lot of rock fans to other types of music, and therefore maybe was like, whoa, I kind of like what this is over here. And then maybe people started kind of going on to other genres. I mean, which is great to expand your, you know, obviously your scope in terms of what you listen to. But I think sometimes by being so open and merging everything together, like you said, it just, like you said, they tried to just stick in a box, shit in a box and sell it. It's just one of those, like, let's just try every little thing. Let's put so much money into it. You know, a lot of labels, and, you know, they would put all this money into just something that was just new, even if it wasn't good. Well, it's new, so, you know, let's just do it. You know, it's a new style. They dress differently. It sounds a little different. Let's just do it. And I think in a way, I could have, you know, in a lot of ways too, that might have been, you know, might have hurt the genre a little bit too as well.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing I always try to keep in mind too is that I know a lot of folks, especially, you know, generation or two older than us, who grew up with rock and roll from the very beginning. They like think, well, my generation created this music. Yeah, bullshit. It's an old, you know, the general style goes back hundreds of years. What really changed was the technology, as far as, you know, with how it's created, how it's recorded then, and how it's distributed to the public. But in general, it's guys sitting around playing some type of stringed instrument, playing 3 or 4 chords, putting some type of political or love song around it, and then just basically making a life song. Well, it turns out somewhere in the 40s and 50s, someone figured out guitar amplification. In the 60s, they figured out turning up guitar amplification to the point it got distorted. Along the way, obviously multi-track recording became a thing, became ubiquitous. People figured out all the tricks around that. But at the end of the day, it was a basic genre that's been around for a long, long, long time. And that lends itself to being something. It says to me that it's because it's sort of intrinsic in us. And I know even like my family's Greek, when I listen to, Greek music, it's the basic Greek music that's not, it hasn't been tripped out too much. It's the same, it's real straightforward. It's writing about life, love, pain, joy, sadness, politics. And with these epic choruses, settles down in verses, and they may take a little departure in the middle. And it's not that it's a formula, it's that it's a feeling that manifests itself that way. It's almost like it's the song style is a reflection of the human condition, what life is. Boy, that sounded really heady.
No, a little deep. Yeah.
Well, Peter, this seems like a good place to stop, because we're going to end up going all day long. But I'll tell you what, man, before we go, why don't you one more time tell people about the record and where they can get it, and where they should go to listen to it, where you make the most money if they hear it. How's that?
Well, where we make the most money is at shows, so save your dollars for the shows. But
all right.
Sons of Silver, you can find us, you can Google us and find us at all the usual suspect places, from Spotify, Apple Music, Deezer, Tidal, so on and so forth. They're all playing it. You can also go to our website, sonsofsilver.com. You can follow us on Facebook at, Facebook/Sons of Silver, Instagram, and so on and so forth. I think the best thing to do is, check out our music, stream it. And if you like us, probably follow us on Facebook or join our email list, which you can get on our website. And, we'll be announcing shows. I think we're all going back into the studio at the end of July. So, we're going to probably, I don't know, we're going to do any live streaming thing, but we'll have a lot of clips from behind the scenes, and some of them will be accessible to everyone. Some will only be accessible to, email list members and the likes. So just follow us and catch on there. And hopefully within the next year, we'll be allowed to go back out on the road and meet everyone face to face.
Yeah. We can't wait to check you guys out live, man. I'm real excited for it. It can't come soon enough, man.
Yeah, I feel the same, man.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, Peter, why don't you pick one from the one of the 5 that we have right now for us to wrap it up with, and we'll give people another taste of Sons of Silver. How's that sound?
Well, let's do Outbreak.
Yeah.
I think that's the song of the day.
Hell yeah.
Outbreak from a Foreign Land.
The clairvoyant, Mr. Peter Argyropoulos.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Awesome.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it, man. It's great to be on the show.
Thanks for listening to Aftershocks. For more episodes, go to our website at www.aftershockspodcast.com. Visit us on our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter pages for more news and information on the podcast. And be sure to subscribe, listen to, and review all episodes on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all other podcast platforms. For your music listening pleasure, visit our website or go to www.shockwavesradio.com. For all comments and questions, please email us at info@aftershockspodcast.com.